Hello, I'm Kevin Berger, author of Atheism is Untenable, a book in which I argue why skeptical atheism crumbles beneath its own weight. On this channel, I don't engage in apologetics. Instead, I apply the principles of polemics and skepticism to atheism and the claims made by atheists, of which, despite their claims to the contrary, there are many, including these, among others. This is Justified Nonetheless. If you enjoy or find my content interesting or informative, be sure to subscribe, turn on those notifications, like and share, and be sure to check out the Justified Nonetheless Patreon project for even more exclusive content.
Could you define God?
Yeah. What's your definition of a God?
Yeah. We're not looking for an exhaustive definition of God. We just like a passable definition of God so that we can realize that this thing that's being proposed has characteristics.
But
what is your definition? What is your definition? What is a God?
I muted you for just a second because I want to make sure we're clear on something. We don't define God. Whoever's calling in to defend a God defines that God, and then we'll discuss that God, because God means different things to different people. When somebody says they believe in a God, my question is, what God? Define your God. What God do you believe in? Give me a rough ballpark definition.
In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about description versus definition and why this distinction matters. A definition is a statement of meaning of what something is. A description is a statement about that something that enables people to visualize it better. The question, how do you define God, or a request to define your God, can be intellectually dishonest because it unnecessarily muddies the waters by introducing more subjectivity into the discussion and forcing the person being asked to arbitrarily assign additional peripheral characteristics to the subject that may only be tangentially related to the assertion, and or because it may lead to the commission of a definist fallacy by forcing the person being asked to adopt a definition that doesn't necessarily represent the assertion being made, or worse yet, that is provided by the poser of the question for the purpose of subsequently attacking it. Yes, stipulative definitions are valid within certain contexts because language does that. However, there is no good reason to use a stipulative definition when a reported definition already exists and is sufficient. When these people are asking for a definition of a God, oftentimes what they're really asking for is a definition of a particular deity, so they can then focus on that specific hypothetical entity and ignore anything else that doesn't meet that description. But we aren't talking about a Christianity, a Jehovahism, or even a religion. We are talking about atheism. Imagine that you're driving past a large parking lot and someone says, "I think there's an automobile in that parking lot." You could make guesses as to the make, model, year, and features of the automobile parked there. Someone might say that it's a Porsche. Another may say that it's a 911. Someone might say that it's a 1979, and still another person may speculate that it's a convertible. Turns out it's a 1969 turquoise Volkswagen bus with shag carpet. All the guesses are wrong, but it's an automobile because it's defined as such, regardless of the erroneous descriptors. Consider someone tells you that there's a bird wandering around. Someone guesses that it's a robin. Someone guesses it eats insects. Another person guesses that it has built a nest nearby with twigs and such. It's a penguin. Again, the descriptions are wrong, but it's a bird because it's defined as such. Imagine I say I have a cube. Someone guesses that the sides are 5 inches square. Another person says that it's made of metal. Another says that its weight is 5 pounds. Another person says that it is red. I then produce a plain old die from a set of dice. All the descriptions, once again, are wrong. However, since it's a symmetrical geometric shape of 6 equal square sides, it is a cube because it is so defined regardless of how it is described in terms of color, composition, mass, size, volume, or weight, etc. An automobile is an automobile because it's defined as an automobile. A bird is a bird because it's defined as a bird. A cube is a cube because it's defined as a cube. And yes, A God would be a God because it's defined as such, irrespective of how it might arbitrarily be described. That is why the distinction between definition and description matters. The description is being leveraged to narrow the scope of the discussion. If any part of that narrow description can be defeated, then the entire argument is defeated, and there are atheists who will celebrate this. However, that gets us no closer to answering the question that should first be addressed. Does any deity of any kind exist? We should be focusing on the likelihood of that proposition. Only after we have answered that does it make any sense to contemplate what specific characteristics an entity might possess. And contrary to the claims that are made by atheists, there isn't this huge nebulous idea of what a God is. There are very basic understandings of what being a godhood entails, as indicated by these following definitions from various dictionaries, which I will be showing you here momentarily. Take a look at these. Okay, before we get started, it's worth noting here that typically in the Western world, when we talk about God, we're talking about God with a capital G, that being the deity of the Abrahamic faith specifically. In this particular case, however, we're not talking about any particular deity. We're talking about theism versus atheism. So we need a definition that encompasses every possible deity. With that in mind, in this particular case, I'm not necessarily using the primary entry because the primary entry is referring to that specific deity of the Abrahamic faiths. Alright, so with that out of the way, if you look at the top left-hand corner, from Cambridge Dictionary, the definition is a spirit or being believed to control some part of the universe or life and often worshipped for doing so, or something that represents this spirit or being. The top right-hand corner, according to Collins Dictionary, in many religions, a god is one of the spirits or beings that are believed to have power over a particular part of the world or nature. The bottom left-hand corner, according to Merriam-Webster, a being or object that is worshipped as having more than natural attributes and powers. And in the bottom right corner, according to Oxford, a being or spirit who is believed to have power over a particular part of nature or who is believed to represent a particular quality. So as you can see, there is an understanding, there is a consensus among people of what a god is in the general sense. There are very different ideas in terms of interpretations of deities, very different ideas in terms of descriptions of specific deities. But when we're talking about a god in the general sense, there is a consensus there. There is an established understanding. There is an adopted convention for that. So there's no need when someone says to define your God to do anything beyond simply giving them the definition from your nearest dictionary. That is what we're talking about when we're talking about a God. Now, if you want to then take the conversation beyond that into the realm of religion, that's an entirely separate subject. But when we're talking about theism versus atheism, you have to include every possible interpretation of every possible deity. And that means you have to use a definition that is all-inclusive. With that in mind, remember, even if your beliefs aren't necessarily true, they should be justified nonetheless.